Hey guys, Arlisha here and welcome to another video. Today we are returning to our limited palette series. I haven't actually checked yet. Is this number 9? 10? It's at least number 9. And I feel like as we go on, the series is getting a little bit more loose and a little bit more open. And the primary reason I wanted to make this particular video or work with this particular palette was because I had this itching to work with an opera rose. It's a color that I kind of discarded early on in my watercolor journey. Like I just decided that I didn't need this neon vibrant pink and just didn't really think about it much and started building my color palette habits around other colors. And even like a quinacridone magenta or something is different from an opera rose, like a really bright color. But I have been fascinated by the color lately and wanted to explore some mixes. When I was thinking about the paints that I have, the first palette that jumped out to me was my Paul Rubens set, which I actually haven't used in a long time. And I knew that that was the opera rose that I wanted. And I decided to build a palette that utilized green instead of blue, which is something that we have explored before. And I love those mixes so much, especially those moody neutralized purples. And you really can find a sort of misty blue in mixing like a turquoise with this pink, especially because it's not as warm as like something that leans closer to orange. And so there's so much variety, and I love the granulation in this color, this in particular, this sort of teal color. So beautiful, so lovely. I will leave the pigment numbers. Hopefully I put them on the screen, and I will put them in the description of the video as well if you're curious what the specific colors are that we're using today. And I was really excited to see how using a color that I don't normally use and kind of making that the foundation of the palette would shift the final outcome of the piece. You know, what kind of atmosphere would we end up with when I focused and centralized the piece on a color that I don't normally use? I wasn't really planning for much saturated neon pink to actually be present in the piece. I still wanted a lot of mixes, a lot of desaturation, and then maybe a few selective pops of that pink color or selective areas of higher saturation. For this piece, I wanted to have a lot of structure in the ears, and I was working with a pose where the figure is actually facing away from us, so we're seeing the back of the head, and I wanted to build a lot of structure into the ears and work with loose florals in the rest of the figure, and that was kind of all I knew about the structure going into it. I didn't have a super exact idea of how this piece would turn out or what my process would be like, but it was actually such a huge relief to find that even if I didn't know every single step I was going to take in the painting, I always knew what my next step was going to be. So even if I didn't know exactly what I had to do to finish the piece, I always knew one step ahead. You know what I mean? So I was able to do the next things and then just going, okay, I don't know 2 steps ahead, but I'll reassess after the next step. I'll just take one step, see where I'm at, see if it's done, and then take another step and see if I'm done. And I was able to work through that and get to a place where I'm overall pretty satisfied with the piece. This original will be for sale on my website, and you can find prints as well. And this video will be featured as the real-time video for my patrons on Patreon and my members on YouTube. So if you'd like to see the full process for this painting without any bits cut out, You can check that out over on Patreon. That will be up probably early next week. And it will also be a Q&A, so I will be answering any questions that my YouTube members or my patrons have for me while I work on this piece. I find that when I end up using a lot of colors and there's just a rainbow of things present, especially like with these ears, I went into them thinking, okay, I'm just going to use like mostly pinks and reds and a little bit of yellow in the ears, and then there will be more color variants in the rest of the figure. But it always kind of gets away from me, and I end up including so many other colors. So there's greens and purples and blues in the ears, but I love it and I'm really happy with it. I love how the ears have a sense of structure to them, and that's kind of where most of the structure is. I've really been wanting to find a voice for myself in the creation of like loose watercolor florals, and I feel like every time I explore it and every time I take the time to try things, I'm getting closer to something that I like and a way to build that structure that meshes with how I paint things like skin and human features, trying to find a balance of putting those two things together. And I'm getting closer, which is exciting. I'll put a link up in the card if you'd like to see the putting together, the assembling, and the first testing of this Paul Rubens palette. I was a little distracted by it when I first got it because there's not a true or like a more primary blue, and this is a little bit limited in that way on its own. And over time, I have played with this palette every once in a while, every so often, and there is something beautiful about its limitations because it kind of allows you, or at least it allows me to really draw on the strengths of the palette and the things that make it unique. I love the shape of these wells. It's so fun to get to dilute the color right there in the well, where the paint is. I love that so much. For me, the bigger wells are, the better. I find half pans to feel a bit restrictive because they're so small, especially because I like to use larger calligraphy brushes, and I like to dilute the color in water right there in that well. So I love this palette. It's really nice for that. I actually never put any stickers on this palette because I wasn't sure how often I was going to use it, but after working on this painting, I think it's finally time to put some stickers on this one, so I'll probably do that soon. Two other features about this palette that I feel made it really unique. One was the opacity. At least two of the colors, maybe even all of them except for the opera pink, have white mixed in. So the colors are just a bit more opaque, and I had so much fun embracing that. And it was a challenge to not allow my colors to get too muddy, because that was definitely something that could happen quickly, especially when you have colors that are closer to opposite one another in the color wheel. They neutralize so quickly, and when you add in white, things can get muddy, so having a sort of red or pink and a green can neutralize and muddy very quickly. So it was a fun exercise, a fun challenge to control those mixes and be subtle about the colors I was using. So opacity, that was fun to play with, and also granulation. I believe that teal turquoise color, it granulates a lot, and because all of the mixes, or at least most of them, had little bits of each other in them, that granulation is present almost everywhere, and it adds so much texture and so much interest, and I just had a lot of fun playing with it, just so much fun. It's fascinating for me to look back on this piece and to see so much blue, like so many instances of bluish colors, because there isn't actually like a straight blue or a pure blue in this palette, but just from the mixes and the pigments present, I was still able to represent those tones, which is so much fun. It really is just the heart of what makes the limited palette series so enjoyable, in getting to discover the strengths and the surprises and the beauty of selective colors. You know what I mean? Just what individual colors and their mixes have to offer. It's such a fun process, as always. Again, if you're interested in this original, you can find it on my shop as well as prints, and I will have the real-time version of this video available for my patrons and my YouTube members next week. So that's coming up pretty soon. I had a lot of fun with this painting. The more time that passes, the more I like it, the more I enjoy it. It feels like a direction that I'm excited to continue exploring with art, and I can't wait to hear what you think of it as well, the piece and the palette. Let me know what you think. As always, a massive, huge, most sincere thank you to my members on YouTube and my patrons on Patreon. I love making content for you guys, and you can check out those platforms if you're interested in supporting me and my art and my family more. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join me for this video. I hope that you are well, and I will talk to you next week. Bye bye.